Plus, we're going to be talking about the thousands of passengers across the UK, including my own child, who've suffered travel chaos and continuing to suffer travel chaos after an air traffic control failure grounded planes at the start of the school summer holidays yesterday. Of course they did. That's just what happens in this country. It's not often I end up agreeing with the likes of Michael O'Leary of Ryanair, saying people should be sacked when it's not him. But he's completely right in this case in terms of air traffic control here. Lots to talk about, and joining me for all the chat, as always on a Thursday, delighted to say, is Philip Ingram, MBE, former Senior Military Intelligence Officer. A very good morning to you, sir. Good morning. So there's nothing happening there whatsoever, so we may as well pack up and just
Yeah, exactly. I've said this, I mean, literally every day since we've been on air for 9 years. Another quiet news day. There's no such thing as quiet summer anymore. Remember last summer? I mean, this time last year,
we're making stories. Oh no, we were taking stories that wouldn't have made the headlines.
We were making stories up, weren't we, about the protests, weren't we? I do want to talk about Palestine, but I do also have my questions about this, and I'll explain why it is about this and not perhaps a topic that you to talk about, and as I'm sure Mike Graham explained to you earlier as well, we're going to talk about some of Britain's top lawyers that say warning Keir Starmer that recognising a Palestinian state risks breaking international law. I want to know what your reaction is to that. Do you not care? Is it irrelevant? Is it quite ironic that this man, who basically does everything he says because of international law, we can't stop the boats because of international law, we can't deport people because of international law, Lord Hermer, as Attorney General, says, you can't pick and choose, it's not pick and mix, international law is international law. Apart from when it involves Israel or Palestine. Funny that. But give us a call on the 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222, and you can get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. So let's talk about this. But then I also want to talk about the Manchester Airport attack and those convictions. But obviously there's still a lot of legal considerations around that. But does it matter if the recognition of a Palestinian state is in breach of a 1933 convention, which apparently we never even signed up to?
Well, it does, given the history of Keir Starmer and Lord Hermer. And I detect his fingers all over the statements that have come out, where they want to quote international law, and that's their excuse for doing things. This particular convention is the Montevideo Convention, signed in 1933. We didn't sign up to it because it was primarily put together for recognition of different countries around in South America and elsewhere, hence the name. But it's got some very clear principles that should be applied whenever you're recognising a country. And one of the clear principles plays directly into Keir Starmer's hands. It is being able to define geographically the country that's there. And of course, he knows how to define a woman. So that's why he has gone down the state that he's in, because he's using the same principles.
Maybe he could recognise a trans-Palestinian state. They could just simply identify as a Palestinian state and he would believe it.
Well, see, we've got a solution now.
There we are. See, look, talkTV. I mean, genuinely, this is public service broadcasting at its best, solving one international crisis at a time.
I've got a solution for their election as well that he put into the yes. Well, we've got Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana setting up their party, and they're so pro-Palestinian. We should send them there so that they can ensure that true democracy is applied across the region.
They should absolutely go.
I think that would be their civic duty and our national duty to do that.
Absolutely, they should go to Gaza. I'm happy to do a crowdfunder for. I'll pay it myself. Go to the savings account. I'll pay for their ticket. But yeah, this treaty again. It lays out 4 key criteria for the state in international law, and we touched on a lot of this earlier in the week, pointing out, Palestinian state, where is it? Yes. Who runs it? So to be a state, you have to possess a permanent population. Oh, wait a minute, so not a refugee population? Well, that'll end all that aid then, won't it? Because if you're not a refugee, I mean, these are people who've been born like two generations in this state, but apparently are still refugees. A defined territory, again, we've got the West Bank, we've got Gaza. They're not even, joined up state, but pieces of land. What is that territory? And what has been offered previously, which is 95% of that territory by Israel, and they've offered 5% of Israel in return for the 5% that they're not going to get of their other territory they claim. That's been rejected twice now, I think, twice by the Palestinian Authority, whoever's in charge that week. You have to have a government. Well, OK, you can't. You also have to have the capacity to enter into relations with other states. Well, we don't have any dealings with Hamas because they're a prescribed terrorist organisation. Palestinian Authority, the supposed moderates in this, big fans of Fatah.
Well, they are Fatah. Yasser Arafat.
They are Fatah, exactly.
Yasser Arafat.
The moderates in this scenario are not the people we would call moderates.
No.
So you've got two massively extremist groups. One is a proscribed terrorist organisation. Neither has held an election for 20 years. We don't know what the actual state is. Bearing in mind they claim the state of Israel as the Palestinian state. Well, that's not negotiable, is it? That's not going to happen. So Israelis are not going to go, oh, sorry, you're right, fair enough, we'll leave this territory. It's not going to happen. So on all of those bases, there is no Palestinian state. Correct. So why on earth is our Prime Minister wasting his time holding an emergency cabinet meeting, pontificating and prancing about on the world stage, making statements, when we are dealing with 1,000,001 crises at home that he should be dealing with? Because last time I looked, he was elected Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and not Prime Minister of the sodding Middle East.
Because he's pandering to his backbenchers and what he considers as populist opinion.
It's an outrageous allegation against the Prime Minister.
And people also fail to recognise that the last time there was elections, it led to a civil war. It wasn't a civil war against Israel. It was a civil war between Hamas and Fatah, who control the West Bank. And therefore, they don't like each other. They don't get on well together. And then again, you look at the relations...
It's not going to be a Tory Lib Dem coalition, is it?
No, I don't think so. And then you look at what goes on elsewhere in the Middle East, and the Hamas grew out of the Egyptian Brotherhood. That's why Egypt, instead of opening the aid routes in from Egypt into Gaza, built a bigger wall and made it wider.
And Muslim Brotherhood are nutters too.
Oh,
I've been to Egypt lots of times since the Muslim Brotherhood have taken charge. Sorry, let's call them what they are. They're religious fanatics. I mean,
nutters is better.
Nutters,
yes.
It's probably Islamophobic, isn't it? No, I mean it's not. It's a particular strand of Islamism, which is very different from someone being a Muslim. The reason why we didn't recognise the Palestinian state, but I think 140 countries have. But we'd only be the second country, well, now Canada in the G7 after France, that would recognise its state because we're supposed to be grown-up countries that deal in realpolitik. And again, Benjamin Netanyahu, love him or hate him, at the end of the day, he has to deal with realpolitik. When you are defending your borders against, let's be honest, savages, because people who want to rape and murder and pillage and kill children and take hostages and the like, and will happily sacrifice their own children to do that, are savages. They're not part of normal human Western civilization. That's for sure. When you're dealing with that on your border, you wouldn't be in favour of a two-state solution. But by the way, neither is Hamas and neither is the Palestinian Authority. They're in favour of a one-state solution, which is just Palestine and no Israel.
And you have to remember, Palestine, everyone says Palestine existed before, they bring out all these maps and everything else. It was a British construct for administration purposes whenever the British rule had it. And I find it fantastic whenever I see Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland turning around and saying they don't want any British influence in anything else, and Sinn Féin are then turning around saying they want Palestine, which is a British construct historically. Yeah. But they refuse to go then back to the land of Judea when you start to then go really back in history, and then fail to recognise that the Jewish faith existed hundreds and hundreds of years before the Muslim faith came in. So these people that are in the region are not from that region.
It's just a load of absolute... The whole thing is based on absolute nonsense. And again, most of the people debating this on Twitter and calling me a Mossad-paid whore, baby killer, genocidal. Apparently, I'm going to end up in The Hague. I mean,
I got all that this week as well. It's great.
Look, give me a day, I'll put it in my diary. It's going to be a lot of paperwork, isn't it?
Well, it is.
I'm not making life, but genuinely, they are just, most of these people, I read down their Twitter feed, they are so unbelievably ignorant of the most basic facts. You don't have to agree with me on Israel, but can we at least agree on some facts? But it was really interesting, I thought, and we mentioned on the show yesterday, the freed British Israeli hostage Emily Damari. She's the one who lost her two fingers because they were shot off, and then she was basically sewn up by a Palestinian surgeon who may or may not have deliberately left her with nerve damage to cause her pain, and a bullet in her thigh as well. Eventually freed after God knows how long behind bars, including being held in a 2-metre by 2-metre cage, along with 7 other people, including an 8-year-old girl. I mean, we're talking about 6 other people, an 8-year-old girl, absolutely horrific treatment of that, as if they were animals. And she basically cried shame on the Prime Minister for recognition of Israel, of Palestine, and said it risks rewarding terror. It was a moral failure, and he was on the wrong side of history. I couldn't agree with them more.
Well, Hamas has congratulated Keir Starmer on making that statement. There was a very interesting statement I read from answered a question I read from a former head of intelligence, Saudi intelligence, and he had been ambassador to the UK and ambassador to the United States. And he was asked whether he would go in and be able to influence Hamas to comply with what had been said. And his statement was, well, why would Hamas listen to me? They haven't done anything so far. They haven't listened to God, and therefore it is God that should judge them.
Oh, well, interesting. Well, I thought was, again, possibly the most significant thing this week actually has actually been, we've got Steve Witkoff, the US envoy, he's in Israel right now and is likely, we understand, to go into Gaza with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. But it is interesting, it's the Arab League, across the board, Saudis, Egypt, Qatar and others have all agreed, all signed up, basically calling on Hamas to down weapons, to free the hostages and to agree to ceasefire. I think that's quite telling. I think that is quite telling. That will have more influence than anything Keir Starmer has done. Let's talk about things back at home, because you know what? We matter too. Let's talk about the Manchester airport attack last summer. Bearing in mind, the first images we had from this attack on police officers was actually an image of a police officer attacking a man who was lying prone on the ground, still on the ground, head down, and the first images we saw was video footage of a police officer, PC Marsden, kicking him in the head, stamping on his face, on his head. Absolutely shocking. We discussed it at the time, discussed it with lots of police officers. Richard Tice was just on Mike Graham's show saying he'd always defended the police officers in this, the context. And yes, we always said we needed to know the context, but I spoke to a lot of police officers on air and off air who said, whatever the provocation, your job as a police officer, and you're trained in it, you're a trained military man, you can lose it, and a member of the public loses it. It's understandable, but police and soldiers are trained not to lose it. That's part. Once you've restrained someone, you shouldn't. The context, and we know that there will now be no charges. We know this some months ago, no charges against the police for this, although he's facing misconduct charges within the police and may well lose his job if he is found to have committed a wrongdoing. But the reason why he had acted the way he did, as it emerged in the trial, was because of the claim of what we then saw when another video, or the full video was shown to us. Interesting that the first video that was shown to us was an incredibly small excerpt, and we saw a longer video of what had actually happened in full. Now, as a result of that, but also as a result only of reform threatening a private prosecution of two brothers, we actually got prosecutions. Now, yesterday, Mohammed Fahir Ahmad was found guilty of assaulting two female police officers at Manchester Airport, knocking PC Lydia Ward down, knocking her down, breaking her nose, hitting her in the face. He is also convicted of assaulting PC Ellie Cook. And he also is convicted of assaulting a member of the public at the airport Starbucks, where he punched him and headbutted him. Now, the jury was unable to decide whether Ahmad and his brother, Mohammed Ahmad, who's his 26-year-old, so 6-year older brother, had assaulted the male police officer. They didn't come to a conclusion on that. The prosecution say that they will be seeking a new trial on that. That means we can't ask for calls on this. And I know you want to have your say, but legally speaking, contempt of court would be a criminal prosecution against us and you if we did anything or said anything that could prejudice that trial. But we can talk about the assaults on the female police officers. It was all contained in that video. We saw it clearly. I'm amazed that the jury took that long to find them guilty on the charges against the women. It was there before us. The claims from this brother was, I didn't realise they were police officers. I didn't realise they were women. A perfectly good character. I don't know about you. If I get into a little beef with somebody in a cafe, and apparently there was a claim that some man had been bothering his mother on the plane who was picking her up. I'm not sure I'd even know how to headbutt someone, but apparently he knew how to throw a punch and to hit this man. He knew how to throw a punch to hit two police officers down, and he knew how to headbutt someone. Not the innocent character that he claimed to be. When that video was first put out, when we thought he was the victim of an assault himself, by the police, and we had the likes of Paul Wall, the local Rochdale MP, we had Yvette Cooper, we had lots of people coming out and saying, this is a terrible, terrible thing, and these men are poor innocent men who've been horribly attacked. Unprovoked attack.
It was shocking, the response of government ministers and MPs on what was clearly a snippet of a video, and they could not put it into context of what happened. And for the Home Secretary to come out with that, that's unforgivable.
Yeah.
And you know, I've looked at the videos that have come out with the court case and everything else, and I'm gobsmacked that A, like you, it took the jury so long to come up with their conclusion, and B, it was a majority decision. It wasn't a unanimous decision. And of course, looking at what was coming out of the statements from the convicted, and looking at the facts that happened from that you can see that was presented to the jury.
But this wasn't a he said, she said.
It wasn't a he said, she said.
But also this whole idea, oh, police officer, I didn't realise they were police officers, I just felt I was assaulted.
He was looking at police officers before.
But also, you've just punched someone in front of a crowded Starbucks in an airport. Oh, no CCTV or police in an airport, right? You just punched someone in the face and headbutted them, right? Are you then surprised that police might then turn up to arrest you? And in full uniform. They weren't plainclothes officers.
And there were police officers in uniform with their caps on, which said quite clearly said police,
I mean, there's just
he could see in his field of vision.
Clearly, well, most of the jury saw through that. But again, we will be having another trial, we expect, regarding the allegation of assault against both brothers on the male officer, who a lot of this is focused on. But it is just reading up. I mean, again, I find it astonishing that it took so long for the CPS to bring charges, and they wouldn't have brought. I swear, if it wasn't for the public outcry, they wouldn't have brought charges. But let's just go back to July last year, when the Labour MP Paul Wall, he's an old colleague, he's an old journalist, he's an old colleague of mine actually, and he was only elected, 3 or 4 weeks earlier to the Rochdale seat, and he said there was deep concern about footage shot when we only saw the video of the stamping on the head. He said that the family of this man were deeply traumatised, and the family had appealed for calm following protests, because remember there were protests outside the local police station. People were claiming Islamophobia and good knows what. He said it's clear they are deeply traumatised by what happened. This is a hard-working Rochdale family, some of whose members are police officers themselves, and are therefore particularly shocked at what they've witnessed. The family also want me to make it crystal clear they have no political agenda, do not condone political violence, and do not want to take part in any protests. They want me to appeal for calm. I mean, just extraordinary. The blatant lies that were told by these brothers to their MP, to their lawyer, they were there, they know the context of the first original video. They knew what they had done. They've just been, well, one of them has just been convicted of assaulting 3 different people, and there they were sitting there like butter wouldn't melt in their mouths. Remember that picture of them on the sofa?
They've been groomed to do everything. That was clear. You could see it.
They chose to do it.
Yeah, they chose to do it. And he was out of control. And he's been convicted for being out of control and sentencing.
The terrible thing is the police officer who, I mean, I've still got very big issues with what the male police officer did. Now, there's no criminal proceedings related to that, but there is a police investigation into his conduct. And even knowing the full context, I've got more sympathy for that police officer. Even at the full context, I think the final stamp was unacceptable.
Yeah. Yes. But if we recognise what happened beforehand, and I have to be very careful what I say here, he had just, he was in a very violent, fast-moving event that was going on. He had just lost 2, possibly 3 colleagues, and he didn't know the extent of their injuries. And they were armed officers, and therefore he didn't know what was going to happen to the control of the weapons. And he still had someone who was not responding to direction to desist, and he had to stop him. Yeah. And an armed officer, where you think there's going to be a threat, their other option is to pull their weapon out and shoot them. Yeah. Now, that you could have probably justified if he did not stop and you thought that it was a threat to life, and he didn't know what had happened to his other colleagues. He didn't know how badly injured they were, and this individual was resisting, and he was now almost by himself trying to deal with this. Yeah, I mean, again, I've got a lot more sympathy. I have a lot more sympathy, but certainly, I mean, when I first saw that original video, I immediately called police officer friends of mine and spoke to contacts on the show and said, what do you think? Because I can't judge. I'm not a police officer. I've not been in that scenario. And to a man and a woman, they all said they thought it was unacceptable. And most of them agreed, even after they'd seen the full video, that it had gone too far. But again, am I bothered about it?
not so much.
But if the police officer thought his life was at risk,
then it's different.
Then it's different.
I completely understand that. Perhaps again, but that shocking isolated video clip who got a hold of that? Who put that out, and why was that? Why was that whole message out? And why did the CPS not prosecute sooner? When it comes to a man now convicted of those 3 very serious assaults, hasn't been sentenced yet. They have been remanded behind bars anyway, both men. But we are looking at something akin a maximum of 5 years realistically, which I think a lot of people would regard for assaulting 3 people, including 2 women police officers, is absolutely not enough.
Oh, very much so. And violent crime, I think the government needs to review that. Maybe call an emergency meeting of the Cabinet.
We should call an emergency meeting of the Cabinet about that, shouldn't we?
And increase the sentences.
I would love to ask for your thoughts on this, but I'm not allowed to because of the contempt of court rules, because there is another pending trial. Once that is over, whatever the verdict is regarding the 2 allegations against the 2 brothers involving the alleged assault of the male police officer, PC Marsden, then we can discuss it in full. But I hope you'll understand I can't take your calls on that as much as I would like to.